This is where Genghis made his first raid into foreign territory in 1207. It was also the Mongols' first encounter with a civilization which built cities, static defenses, and huge monuments. Although the kingdom was not conquered, after 2 years of raids, Genghis had extorted a vast amount of loot from this rich and opulent domain. Genghis also extracted a promise from the king that he would provide troops to assist the Mongols in future campaigns whenever the need arose. Satisfied, Genghis withdrew from Xixia and decided to turn his attention further east, towards the Jin. The Jin were far more experienced at dealing with invaders. The northern highlands had always been their first line of defense. The Jin kept close guard on the passes. But the Mongols had planned carefully, and by 1211, after several sharp engagements, they overran the mountain garrisons. After that, they hoped the way was open onto the fertile plains beyond. But the Jin were not about to succumb that easily. Right across their empire, the alarm drums were sounded. This was the traditional way of inspiring, almost hypnotizing, the Jin defenders. By the summer, the Mongols finally confronted the Jin army. Though heavily outnumbered, Genghis decided to attack. In a devastating display of mobility and discipline, Genghis's mounted archers poured a shower of arrows onto the Jin ranks. Totally demoralized, the Jin army then faced a shattering charge of the Mongol heavy cavalry. Within a few hours, the 70,000-strong defensive army was utterly destroyed. When the terrible news reached the capital, the Jin commanders retreated behind their fortified walls. Here, they reckoned they were safe, for they knew the Mongols did not have the equipment or the training to breach these defenses. Genghis had to admit that they were right, for the time being, but he vowed to return. If the Jin walls and cities were strange, incomprehensible to Mongol eyes, so too was the fertile countryside, peopled by millions of peasants. They wondered at the well-ordered terracing, at the irrigation canals, at the farms and villages. What the Mongols didn't understand, they despised, and what they despised, they destroyed. Over the next few years, hundreds of thousands of Chinese peasants were slaughtered. By the time Genghis's armies returned to attack the capital in 1214, they were equipped with rudimentary siege machines. The Mongols isolated the city for almost a year, condemning the citizens to appalling privations. In 1215, the capital finally surrendered, and the Mongols entered unopposed. Once inside the walls, the alien sights and sounds of the city perplexed and aggravated the Mongols. For once, discipline broke down. The soldiers ran amok. They rode up and down the narrow streets, setting everything ablaze. Tens of thousands were slaughtered in a frenzy of uncontrolled butchery. A visiting ambassador reported that when the fires were put out, the city was littered with corpses and the streets greasy with human fat. Genghis Khan was not there to see the slaughter. He was already preoccupied by events far off to the west. In 1218, a caravan of Mongol merchants traveling to the great Western Empire of the Kharazm Shah were stopped and then executed as spies. Genghis sent an envoy to demand an explanation. When the envoy was also executed, Genghis Khan was furious. Revenge was inevitable. The Kharazm Shah's empire was fabulously wealthy, especially the cities, for they lay along the Great Silk Road, from China to the Middle East. The greatest of these cities was the capital, Samarkand, which the Kharazm Shah had turned into an opulent pleasure palace. Here lived Chinese and Persian artisans who wove silk, worked leather, produced silver lame, wove carpets, and even forged an early type of steel. It was a lively, cosmopolitan society. The Kharazm Shah himself was a vain creature, fated by his courtiers as the second Alexander the Great. He believed their flattery and was confident he could handle this arrogant barbarian called Genghis Khan. Genghis took his time. Indeed, he took a year to prepare for the campaign. He withdrew his army from China, summoned men from every corner of the steppe, and put together the greatest concentration of Mongol power ever seen. Estimates put the Mongol army at more than 100,000, but it was probably still less than half the size of the Kharazm Shah's forces. Before setting out, Genghis sent word to the king of Xixia, calling in his promise to provide troops whenever they were needed. But the king replied that if Genghis didn't have enough men, then he didn't deserve to be the great Khan. As Genghis turned his army west, he resolved one day to avenge this insult. The Mongols faced a march of more than 1,500 miles towards their objective, the cities of Bukhara and Samarkand. Their spies had told them that the Kharazm Shah had deployed his defenses along the Sir Darya River, the empire's frontier. Genghis divided his army into 4 separate divisions, 3 of which attacked the frontier at several points at once. The 4th and largest contingent, led by Genghis himself, secretly crossed the Sir Darya River further north, and then promptly disappeared. Instead of turning south towards the enemy lines, Genghis led his army due west, straight into the Kizil Kum desert. The Kizil Kum was impenetrable. There were no known waterholes, no roads, no landmarks. But Genghis had a guide who did know a route of a sort through the wasteland. For months, his contingent made its way secretly across the sands. Then, in March 1218, as the defending armies used up their strength against the other Mongol attacks, Genghis suddenly emerged, over 400 miles behind their lines, outside the walls of Bukhara. Military historians still point to it as one of the most dramatic outflanking movements in the history of warfare. Panic swept through the city, and shortly afterwards, the Bukhara garrison abandoned their posts. Once inside, Genghis and his men galloped into what they imagined was a palace. When it was explained that he was inside a mosque, he ordered that it be converted into stables. Copies of the Quran were thrown to the 4 winds, and the boxes that had held them were used as mangers. Then Genghis mounted the pulpit and berated the citizens about the treachery of their sultan and the reasons for his victory.
I am the punishment of God. If you had not committed great sins, he would not have sent a punishment like me.
Terrified by the accounts of massacres in China, the Bukharans awaited their fate. Unlike China, the sacking of Bukhara was disciplined and controlled. Beneath this very minaret, thousands of people were put to death